Toys, Amazing Stories Behind Some Great Inventions by Don Wolfson. Wind-up toy and automatons. What makes a wind-up toy work? Turning a key tightens a spring inside the toy. As the spring unwinds, it turns gears, which move the toy's parts. Today's wind-up toys are for children, and most of them are relatively simple. Originally, wind-up toys were for adults, usually royalty, and were often extremely complicated and expensive. Rather than wind-up toys, they were called automatons, and usually featured people, animals, or vehicles of some kind. With the finest craftsmanship, automatons moved by means of elaborate internal clockwork device. The exterior was formed and decorated by hand, in many cases with the utmost skills and attention to detail. Mainspring and affixed to toy, ratchet wheel, driving gear, key, and affixed to key, axle and gear. Turning the key on the wind-up toy tightens the spring. As the spring unwinds, it turns the gear inside the toy, causing the toy to move. In the late 14th, a German inventor by the name Karl Grod was often invited to royal banquets. Sitting at the table, Grod would open his hand and release a metal fly that buzzed across the room, circled the long dining table, and then returned to rest on its maker's hand. A few years later, Grod created a life-size mechanical eagle that could fly around town and then return to its original spot. In 1509, the famous artist and inventor Leonardo da Vinci constructed a mechanical lion to welcome Louis XII to Italy. When the French king was seated on his throne, Leonardo placed the animal on the floor at the opposite end of a great hall. As spectators stared in amazement, the clockwork lion moved slowly toward the king. It stopped in front of him and, as if in tribute to the king, tore open its chest with its claws. A decorative fleur-de-lis, the symbol of French royalty, tumbled out and fell at the king's feet. An even more incredible story is told about René Descartes, a renowned French philosopher and scientist of the 16th. Descartes believed that all living creatures, including people, are basically just highly developed machines. To demonstrate this, he constructed a life-size mechanical girl. Shortly after completing the automaton, who he called from China, he took her on a sea voyage. By accident, the captain of the ship set her in motion. Terrified by her sudden movement, the captain ran. The robotic from China kept coming toward him. In a panic, the captain grabbed the automaton and threw it overboard. Perhaps the most fantastic mechanic figures of all time were created by Jean-Pierre Droz, a Swiss watchmaker, and by his sons Henry Louis. One of those made by Jean-Pierre, called the Rider, was a full-size likeness of a young boy seated at a desk. When put into motion, the clockwork child dipped his pen in a bottle of ink, shook off the surplus with a flick of the wrist, then proceeded to write clear and correct sentences. As each line was completed, the hand holding the pen moved to the beginning of the next line. Superior to the writer was the designer, an automaton created by Jean-Pierre's son, Henry Louis. Like an artist studying his model, the automaton paused from time to time as he sketched, examined his work, corrected errors, and even blew the eraser dust from the paper. one occasion, the designer was seated before King Louis XVI of France. After working for some time, the automaton put down his pencil and gestured with his hand to his work, a portrait of the French king. Later, when Henry Louis gave a demonstration in England, his automaton drew portraits of the English monarch and other royalty. Henry Louis died at the height of his fame in 1790. With him, the art of make automatons declined. Though a few choice pieces were created after this time by other artists, the quality of work went steadily downhill. More and more the toys were made by machine rather than hand, and they became generally much simpler and cheaper. By the 19th century, they were made of tin or plastic and mass-produced in large numbers. Today, wind-up cars, tractors, trains, spaceships, and robots roll off assembly lines by the thousands. Many of them are clever and fun to play with, but the era of automatons is over. Will this specialized art form return? What do you think?